Hello, everybody. I'm Rene Ramos, director of the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives, and this is Rewind, the show that looks back on Florida's past with historic film and video. It's time for another trip back into the past, so sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Rewind.
On Wednesday, June 17th, demonstrations continued peacefully. A group of 80 marched to the downtown slave market for a short session of prayers, hymn singing, and sermonizing. There were few police or spectators. Later that afternoon, 29 Negroes and whites staged a wade-in at a previously all-white beach. Only 3 had bathing suits. The rest rolled up their trouser legs and went in barefoot. A team of police and state troopers stood by but did not interfere, and most white bathers left the water but otherwise ignored the demonstrators. Before it was over, the entire group stood chest deep in the surf, clothes and all, splashing water and singing. It was their first major breakthrough in the long fight to end segregation in St. Augustine. But since then, the quiet beach has given way to violence. The special police force has employed boats to ward off the demonstrators. They also have used a solid line of patrol cars to make a divisional line between the white segregationists and the demonstrators. Again last week, about 100 civil rights marchers showed up at the public beach normally used only by whites. There was a brief flare-up, ending quickly with the arrest of a white attacker and a Negro demonstrator. The marchers then resumed their gradual procession to the water, where a group of whites waited for them. Reaching the water's edge, they knelt in the surf, and a prayer was led by a white minister. Standing on the edge of the group was a white woman. Suddenly, other white women sprang on her, knocking her into the water. Once more, police moved in quickly, broke up the scuffle, and made more arrests. Toll for the midday session, 6 arrests and some minor injuries. Meanwhile, days of closed-door meetings of white business and political leaders produced another breakthrough. After a secret 90-minute session Wednesday afternoon, spokesmen for the white community pledged to abide by all present and future laws, including the new federal civil rights bill. They also endorsed, for the first time in a year and a half of racial turmoil, the concept of a biracial committee composed of law-abiding local citizens. However, James Brock, at whose motel the Reverend Martin Luther King was arrested a week earlier, reiterated the white group's position that under no circumstances would it sit at the same conference table with the man who started it all, Dr. Robert Hayling. At the same time, King was holding a news conference.
That the city police force is doing nothing to protect nonviolent demonstrators and to protect the lives and the property of Negroes in this community and their allies in the white community. We feel that this is tragic indeed, but this will not prevent us from continuing in this struggle. It will not stop us at any point from moving on in our determined thrust toward the goal of a desegregated St. Augustine. In a real sense, this is the beginning of a massive assault on the system of segregation in this community, and there will be no stopping point short of a good faith promise to meet our just demands on the part of the political leaders of the city of St. Augustine. I have definitely committed myself to participating by going to jail if necessary, and tomorrow morning I do plan to make my witness in that area.
I think one of our orders of business is to elect 5 persons to represent us on the biracial committee.
At the First Baptist Church, Reverend Andrew Young and Dr. Hayling call an executive board meeting. Also present are Field Secretary Willie Bolden and Harry Boyta, Reverend King's special assistant.
This represents 2 of the 4 things that we had in our biracial committee claim situation. I mean, not biracial committee, but our list of suggestions for easing the tension in St. Augustine. They would also like for us to give them a little better preparation for the daytime marches and the arrest and things like this. The main thing they're concerned about discontinuing is the night marches. The main thing they want from us is 5 names of persons who will represent us in the biracial committee. So maybe we should get some reactions to this from you people. Then, so we agree maybe to the biracial committee, and they agree to a biracial committee, and to show, say, as a face-saving device in the white community, they will say, well, we agreed to serve on this biracial committee only to stop these night demonstrations. So that's the trade there almost. And then we say, well, okay, we will agree to stop sending people to jail when you agree to consider to the release of these persons who are already in jail and the drop-in of the charges. Now,
no, Andy, I just left too. I think what we've got to take into consideration is that maybe Dr. King hasn't anticipated some of this, and I'm sure he has too. But the Southern strategy and plan is to back up and incorporate many of these things. Like, it wouldn't doubt me, it would surprise me to the highest if the Ponce de Leon Motel doesn't suddenly become a private club. See, throughout the South now, the strategy will be to incorporate all of the municipal, all of the facilities are like this that have been available to the general public now, and make them private corporations, which are not included under the Civil Rights Bill.
While one of the other things that's happening in this movement is the people who are the leaders are the people who do the suffering. If you don't bear the cross, then you can't wear the crown, in other words. See, now, I think that you people have exhibited your leadership ability, even though you're not the old-standing, respectable citizens in the community all the time. You have become the leaders of the people.
I think right now is the time that we should name these persons. And, but we've got to let it be known that the meetings have got to be in good faith with the intentions of doing something tangible. It's no use of us going sitting in a meeting, and it's got to be known that the demonstrations will not cease until after something has been done, or we see some of the works of the committee going on. Because, I mean, it's not fair for us to cease our demonstration just because the committee is meeting.
Well, this I thought we'd try to work out with the lawyers and let them handle that. But the point is that they are willing to see what they can do to ease the situation. And because they didn't negotiate hard on that issue, that's the reason Jose has to keep running back and forth to Savannah. Because a year later, they're still using those charges to harass the people who demonstrated, to try to keep them from demonstrating anymore. It's difficult to have somebody who's in the employ of the white community as your spokesman. That it is usually better to have independent persons who are doing your negotiating for you.
Story as an orchestra.
Back at the SCLC headquarters, Reverend King discusses the prospect of a biracial committee with Reverend C.T. Vivian.
Now, it comes down here that the city must act. The grand jury has listened. They have tried to bring everyone together. They're going to propose a biracial committee. Now, this is one of our 4 points. If we can get the city to back this, then I think we'll really be home safe as a good deal of St. Augustine. The merchant said today, and I don't know whether you'd heard the conclusion of their talk today, the first news conference, and that is that they are going to obey the laws of the past and the laws of the future. Now, what the future really means is the Civil Rights Bill. The past, however, Doctor, they really could integrate if they wanted to and not break any laws whatsoever here. But the Klan has broken out the windows of those that have been.
Yeah. Well, I think the negotiation sessions will go much better if they have official backing. If the city commission and the mayor will go on record backing this, even though they don't sit in on the sessions. I think this is what we need to work on now.
and we need to touch people who are at least on speaking terms with the political power structure to get over to them, or rather to get them to get over to the mayor, the need to carry this out now. I think that's a very important thing to do. Secondly, it seems to me, from my understanding of the mayor's position, that it's going to be difficult to get him to take a stand on the integration of the motels and hotels, because he argues that these are private establishments which the city has nothing to do with. And, you know, he goes into the old argument of private property. So I don't think we're going to get too much from him there. But I think this biracial committee can be very important in at least establishing a climate of concern, and at least an expression of the need to really solve the problem. So I think it's very important to get the right committee.
That the problem is that white people in the community do not want Dr. Haling, and I think this is where the main problem is.
Well, I think we will need to insist, certainly as far as possible, that Dr. Haling should be on this committee. I know that there are objections in the white community, and this is a usual pattern, as you well know. When one takes a stand, he becomes the target and the symbol of all of their objections. And I've talked with some of the people in the white community who have almost an irrational objection to Dr. Haling serving on any kind of negotiation committee.
How much of this do you think is a matter of they're trying to decide who's going to be on our part of the committee, and how much of it is just a matter of what he represents?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I think it's the old paternalistic desire to name the individuals that will negotiate, persons who can be controlled. On the other hand, I think St. Augustine had the feeling that it was a very peaceful, tranquil community, and that it was ahead in race relations. It had done some token things in this area. And then came the moment when the Negro community rose up. And this was a real shock to the power structure. It was a real shock, and it really aroused a deep guilt feeling and an anger at many points. And they had to find a target and a scapegoat and a causal basis for all of this. And so they unconsciously found themselves turning to Dr. Haling as the villain and as the force of evil that brought about the disturbance in this peaceful, tranquil community, in quotes.
But on Thursday, June 18th, the brief calm was shattered by another demonstration at the Monson Motor Lodge, the wildest in over a week.
73 demonstrators, including 16 rabbis.
As the St. Johns County Grand Jury prepared its long-awaited recommendations, a group of 70 white and Negro demonstrators, including 15 rabbis from New Jersey, showed up at the motel to pray. They were met by the establishment's owner, James Brock.
You're on private property, and I'm ordering you to leave this place here. And open this property here. Take your hands off. Treat me like a human being. We all leave private property. We've had enough of you people around here. Oh God, our Heavenly Father, we pray that you lie down in peace. We leave the side of still water. We rejoice my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
While the rabbis were being arrested, Negro and white demonstrators clad in bathing suits jumped into the pool. Brock, frantic with rage, began dumping an acid cleaning agent into the water, apparently without harmful effect to the uninvited swimmers. Finally, an off-duty policeman leaped into the pool and began swinging at the demonstrators. The swimmers were dragged roughly from the water to waiting police vans. WCKT newsman Roger Burnham, who filmed these scenes, was manhandled and threatened by a white observer. He was struck twice by law enforcement officers.
Police pondered their next move. Finally, a city policeman went in after them.
Before it was over, police arrested 37 demonstrators, including 14 rabbis. However, the grand jury report seems to have been the cause of the disturbance at the motel. Its terms, unacceptable to the Negroes, apparently were known before the demonstration took place.
Do we have here participating with us today?
Well, we had 18 in town. Now, I think most of them...
Later that afternoon, Reverend King discussed the demonstration and its effects with Reverend Ralph Abernathy, SCLC leader from Georgia.
Ralph, I think we're in for a serious problem if the police force will continue to act as they did today. They were just outright brutal toward the persons who were in the swimming pool, and particularly
I agree.
The two white fellows. They actually kicked them in the automobile. They twisted their arms. They choked them. And I saw them actually beating one.
That's right.
And I understand that some of the people who were involved in this were the policemen themselves as well as Klansmen.
Well, it was really a horrible experience. I went over near the pool, and I can say that the participants were really great. Man, they were really wonderful.
Yeah.
The white men and the Negro kids. And they were there in the pool, and they did not fight back. And when this chemical was poured into the pool, they still stayed in the water, and they continued to swim, even at the risk of during suffering injury to their eyes and to their
I thought that was marvelous.
That was really marvelous.
Yeah.
And when this man jumped in, it has been reported that he is really a member of the Klan. He jumped in the pool and forced them out, and they were just so brutal to them, and yet they stood up. Now, what are we going to do about it? Are you going to inform the Justice Department?
Yes, I'm going to do that immediately. We've got to do that because this is a clear-cut case of police brutality. And I thought that since the state had taken over here as far as enforcement, police enforcement is concerned, that things would get better. But as I observed that situation, that was raw brutality. And we've got to report it to the Justice Department. I think the other thing is this, and I hope you'll do it immediately, is to get in touch with the sheriff and also Major Jordan, who's the head of the state force, and let them know that some type of chemical was thrown into that water, and that these people need to be examined immediately. It could have done something to their skin.
By a doctor.
Yes, they need to be
Well, the trouble
examined by
is you
a doctor.
don't have a single Negro doctor here. I wonder, do you have a sympathetic white doctor?
Make a direct call to him. I'll get Andy Young to make that call.
Well,
if you will get the sheriff and Major John, and
will.
I'll immediately get this telegram to the Justice Department. I'll probably put in a call to Attorney General Kennedy, because I think if this isn't stopped now, we are going to see much more brutality from the police force, and we just can't take this kind of thing lying down. We don't mind being arrested. We welcome arrest if this is the way they're going to do it. But certainly nobody arrested should be beaten. There is never any excuse for police brutality.
Well, you know, don't you think that St. Augustine's true colors came out today? You know, for the last 1 or 2 days, they have tried to give the impression that everything is so nice in St. Augustine. But don't you think that her true colors came out today?
Definitely.
And also the colors of Mr. Brock.
That's
the
right.
manager of Munson.
Yes. Oh, he was really in an ugly mood today. You see a human being reacting like that toward other human beings. It's a frightening experience, and really it's something that just arouses the deepest righteous indignation within you. It was really very tragic. Here you have spiritual leaders being handled and grabbed as if they're animals.
Well, I want to ask you 2 other questions. What do you think that this experience today will do for the local community? Do you think it will frighten the Negroes, or do you think that it will make them more determined and really unite the community? And I know that the nation will see it on TV. What do you think the response
Well, I
will
think
be?
it will make the local community much more determined. We can't stop now, as you well know, and we've just got to go on out to intensify our efforts. And I know that the local community will be more determined. They have given tremendous support to this movement and have suffered a great deal, as you know. And I think this incident, when they hear about it and know about it, will only stimulate them to act more in terms of determined action to break down segregation and discrimination. In fact, I talked with a man who works downtown. He's one of the men who helps people in sightseeing tours, a Negro man. And he was really magnificent in his statements. He was saying that this thing has to give because the city is losing so much money. And he's saying this is the way to do it. He was just wonderful. He said, you've got to put the pressure on to get it done. He said, I'm losing money every day, but I'm proud to see this being done. And he said, it's the only way to do it. Now, this was a man who's actually losing money, so it shows what Negroes are willing to do and the suffering they're willing to engage in order to solve this problem.
The pressure exerted by Reverend King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference has already cost the city of St. Augustine dearly. In a normal year, 2 million tourists pass through the oldest city. This year, business is down 60%, and businessmen estimate their loss for the first half of June alone at $200,000. Tourism is the bulwark of St. Augustine's economy, bringing in approximately $22 million a year. It means mortgage payments to businessmen and paychecks to thousands of citizens. But with violence stalking the streets, tourists are staying away. There is little industry in St. Augustine to take up the slack. There is no question that St. Augustine faces bankruptcy unless peace is restored. But there is question whether white leaders have bargained in good faith. The St. John jury, instead of forming a biracial committee as it was hoped, appeared to be fighting a delaying action. The day following the melee at the Monson Motor Lodge, Reverend King offered to withdraw his demonstrators for 1 week if the grand jury would form a biracial committee and begin negotiations at once. The jury refused. Meanwhile, Mayor Joseph Shelley has not altered his position in a year and a half of turmoil. He still rejects compromise, but denies reports that other city commissioners are lining up against him.
There has been no political impact on the operations of our city commission. There has been no split. The city commission of St. Augustine remains united and determined in its efforts to conduct the business of St. Augustine in a dignified, logical, legal manner. There's much more to this demonstration procedure in St. Augustine today than the local integration effort. There's no question in my mind but that communism plays a great part in the overall movement. The communists must achieve 2 things in our country to take it over. One thing they're working on daily is the destruction of Christ and God in our schools, in our public life, in our public officials, and in all institutions whereby the legal structure of our nation functions. Secondly, they must destroy completely our local law enforcement agencies. By this I mean our sheriff's department and our police departments. These are the main bulwarks of our citizens against tyranny of this sort. They achieve this by overwhelming police departments of cities. If I knew the answers to all these problems facing St. Augustine today, I would not be the mayor of a small town. More likely, I would be the mayor of a very large city or possibly even the President of the United States. I do know that it is of terrific importance that each American find out what's going on behind the scenes, to find out the true meaning of what's happening in our country today. We are in the midst of a revolution, and the solution to it will not be easy, and it will not be forthcoming until every interested American becomes aware of this.
Whereby the commanding officer of this unit will now have...
Governor Ferris Bryant, no ally of the integrationist movement, has taken a detached position on St. Augustine.
In my opinion, a clear and a present danger does exist to the lives and persons of the citizens of St. Johns County, and as governor, I am, of course, charged with the responsibility to exercise every available means and resource at the command of the state to maintain peace and order. The governor of Florida, the government of Florida, is committed to take whatever action is necessary to maintain peace and order, and I intend to do just that.
Because of the clear and present danger in the nation's oldest city, Governor Bryant went to St. Augustine last Friday to confer with white and Negro leaders in an effort to find a solution to the racial unrest. Afterwards, Bryant ordered an extra 80 state troopers into the racially divided city. But Bryant stresses he has no immediate plans to call out the National Guard. Earlier, Bryant halted all nighttime demonstrations by invoking an 8:30 curfew. Federal Judge Brian Simpson told Bryant previously not to impose such a ban. The governor now stands in contempt with the ruling by Simpson set for Tuesday. The answer to nighttime demonstrations will also hinge on Simpson's ruling. Bryant has said that he is just inches away from solving the problem. But last night, 4 shootings took place in both white and Negro areas, and police finally had to close off the Negro section. Today, a Negro leader says that a biracial committee is close to formation, which could ease the tension. Earlier today, 6 civil rights demonstrators were turned away from a segregated church. We'll return with the outlook for St. Augustine Fountain of Descent Part 3 after this message.
That's about it for this edition of Rewind. Just time to remind you that Rewind features historical film and video from the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives. To see more from the Wolfson Archives collections, visit our website, wolfsonarchives.org. You can search the archives catalog and watch video online. And be sure to connect to our YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of carefully curated clips, or link to the Wolfson Archives Facebook page to keep up with our busy calendar of historical happenings. Until next time, I'm Rene Ramos. Thanks for watching.